Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to this webinar, the latest in our Crossvale Rethink series. My name is Ken Dooley and I'm part of the business team here at Crossvale, and joining me today is Director of Consulting and Principal Architect Brett Kugler. The meeting's been recorded and the on-demand will be available within 24 hours. So in today's webinar, we're going to look at RHEL 6 and ELS, or Extended Lifecycle Support. So RHEL celebrated its 20th birthday earlier this year, and the world's leading enterprise Linux platform continues to evolve and innovate, and we're going to talk about some of those new features. But RHEL 6's time is up, so it means that we have to say farewell to an old friend, and today we're going to help share some of the ways we can deal with this news. So whether you're watching live with us today or on demand, we really do appreciate you giving up part of your day to join us. So just before we take a quick look at the agenda, some housekeeping. The presentation will be about 25 minutes, leaving a little bit of time at the end to answer your questions. You are all on mute, but there is a Q&A icon at the bottom of the screen, and you may ask questions throughout the webinar and we'll answer them towards the end or after the event if it's more specific to your actual business. And you, as always, you can contact us directly at any time. So let's take a quick look at today's agenda. So the goal of today's webinar is to help you take away an understanding of the current RHEL status and landscape, how to plan and take action to migrate to keep a strong and supported Linux foundation for your business. One of our mantras here at Crossvale is failing to prepare is preparing to fail. So we're here to help you and in your corner to help your business. And I mentioned at the top, this is the latest in a series of our Rethink webinars. Please don't hesitate to visit our website at crossvale.com to access those other on-demand webinars. So a little bit about who we are, for those of you that don't know. So we are an award-winning Red Hat Premier Business Partner, and have been for the last 3 years, excuse me. Most recently in 2020, we won the Leading Edge Partner Award for our innovative solutions. As a company, we focus on helping enterprises rethink their modernization journey, everything on platforms and application side. So from integration, infrastructure, automation, microservices, DevOps, containers, application development. And so from day zero, building an enablement, to day one, development of solutions, and day two, operations and maintenance with our managed services offering. Okay, so on to today's topic. We're going to dive right in and talk about the current state and how we can help. And for that, I'm going to hand over the reins to Brett. So just bear with me for a moment. And Brett, it will be all yours.
Come off mute here. Very good. Thank you, Ken. Yeah. Whoops, one slide too many. All right. So thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As Ken mentioned, this is a continuing series around Red Hat's entire portfolio and how Crossvale can help manage those different platforms. But it all starts at the operating system. And being heavily involved with Red Hat portfolio, we see RHEL environments that span way back to even RHEL 4, all the way through, obviously, the latest and greatest RHEL releases up to the most current version. And it's always an interesting conversation when you engage with a customer and you start looking at their environment and you find a mix of different systems and different states. And typically the systems that are running, still RHEL 4, more prevalent, you find 5 and certainly 6 in the environment. Those tend to be, critical systems or systems that are legacy systems that maybe tribal knowledge has been lost on, and they just kind of continue to function, but nobody really knows how they work. Or you're afraid to touch them in case they break because there's no way out of that particular predicament. So there's a lot of challenges, obviously, keeping these things maintained. And over the years, the operating and maintenance cycles for these platforms has evolved just along with, the rest of the technology stack. So they're lacking a lot of these older features. So obviously today, the current version of RHEL is 8.2. We'll talk a little bit about that in the next slide. Other things that we still see in the environment. Yes, there are still RHEL 4 systems running out there. Those are clearly completely out of support. There is nothing that anybody can do to help those systems except kind of nudge them along a little bit. And we'll talk a little bit about how we can help get you off of such legacy and into kind of net new environments. As Ked mentioned, 5 and 6 or up to 6.9 are in extended lifecycle support, ELS. This means you're getting critical security patches, but really not a whole lot else out of the support there. And then 6.10 is going into regular maintenance support here at the end of November. So really, the whole ecosystem is coming to a close. And we'll call that kind of the previous era of RHEL, if you will. And there's some issues with moving off of those platforms into a newer environment, because there was a major shift from RHEL 6 to RHEL 7 with the introduction of System D and kind of all of the tooling that comes along with that. And then as we move on to RHEL 8, that is really just kind of bubbling up even more, right? Red Hat is really kind of pushing the service and tooling that is available directly from the operating system. And it's bringing together a lot of different components. So one of the key highlights to RHEL 8 is kind of the inclusion of Red Hat Insights. And this is a product that was primarily tied in the past to Red Hat Satellite. But what Red Hat's doing is they're creating a cloud portal for all of their clients. And this cloud portal is giving you visibility into kind of your entire portfolio. And this isn't your normal, subscription level view, so you can see what you're consuming. This is really more about active runtime states and seeing metrics and seeing information about the specific machines. And this started as a way for Red Hat to kind of cluster together the OpenShift environments that their clients were using, so they could have kind of a single view into all of their OpenShift clusters. Now they're adding RHEL, they're adding Ansible automation. So you get a lot of insight just kind of from this cloud portal into your entire infrastructure environment, whether you're running satellite, whether you're running Tower, or whether you're running OpenShift. And in this case, also RHEL systems, right? So along with that comes a lot of new tooling around containerization, virtualization, and security, right? I mentioned RHEL 7 with the introduction of System D. It was kind of a standardization of the tooling inside of RHEL. And that necessitates a lot of changes when it comes to supporting legacy or older operating systems, right? And I'll talk about that here in a second. But that evolution is continuing in RHEL 8. So if you're doing containerization, we're getting rid of Docker and we're introducing the open source equivalents in the new container tool stream. There's additional security enhancements coming into the platform, being able to manage your entire RHEL environments through crypto policies, right? And being able to apply those not just at the machine level, but really at the environment level. So there's a lot of nice feature functionality coming into RHEL 8, but that necessitates a little bit of growing up, if you will, right? And kind of saying goodbye to the old so that we can get on with the new. So what does a migration look like? So there's a number of different challenges that customers of ours have. They come either from a pure open source environment where they've been running, open source CentOS or Fedora, or even, non-RHEL based kernels, things like, Ubuntu or SUSE or something like that. However, the point here is always the same. There's two possible ways of kind of doing this migration. One is to create a brand new server and then carefully move all of your services from the old server to the new server. And the other possibility is to do an in-place upgrade. So in a sense, reinstalling a newer version of the operating system on the existing box. Now, both of those have their challenges. In the case of the system migration, there's obviously a heavy reliance on having to look at the application stack and the services that are being provided by that server, and making sure that there are compatible versions for the new operating system, that we transfer any stateful data across, and that the systems are properly tested after they're brought back up. And in the case of in-place upgrades, we are really limited to the process there and how that works. So for example, you can't upgrade directly from RHEL 6 to RHEL 8 because of kind of that sea change in the tooling that we discussed earlier. You have to go from 6 to 7, and then you go from 7 to 8. So it's kind of a two-step process, a little bit of almost double work, if you wanted to kind of retain that machine. And I'll share some philosophy with you around, some of the ideas on kind of when to choose which of those. And I'll just kind of give you a spoiler right up front. We always encourage our clients to start taking a shorter term view of their server stacks, very much from the kind of the containerization philosophy, and shrinking the scope or the impact that your servers have on your environment. Being able to rebuild, redeploy, and recreate quickly is really going to allow you to unfetter yourself from being leashed to these legacy systems, right? More of that in a minute. So what happens if you don't migrate? Well, clearly going out of support means that you can no longer get support. Now that seems a little bit obvious, but what are the implications there? That means you no longer get critical security patches. If there are vulnerabilities that occur and you are exploited, that all falls back onto you, and you can't get help from anybody else. That's probably the scariest part of this whole conversation. But in addition to that, you can't upgrade your applications, right? We know that applications all have minimum requirements, and generally those age up as the application advances. And so you either have to redeploy that application onto a new server anyway, or you have to upgrade the operating system. And so those are kind of your key challenges. I also mentioned, kind of the lack of knowledge that legacy systems tend to build up, right? So as people leave the company, retire, however that might be, you lose that tribal knowledge, you lose the understanding of what's going on in your environment. There's never really somebody who understands everything end to end, unless you have a really new its footprint, or if this is something that is very small. So generally speaking, those are your three enemies of operationalizing your environment: time, applications, if you will, and support. So what are your upgrade options? And we're going to compare kind of doing this on your own versus bringing in somebody like Crossvale to help you through this process. And again, this is going to be, I think, a little bit obvious to anybody who takes a few minutes to think about it, but having it kind of put together here for you, I think really drives the message home on what to expect. We know that you guys are all very smart people, professional, very capable technically. That's never in question. The question is really about how much time do you have? You have a day job. You're in charge of doing, multiple things. You're on meetings all day. You have, a backlog of items that you've been trying to get to for months and months. We understand this. This is something that is, not it's not exclusive to anybody. Trust us. Everybody kind of find themselves in this position. This idea of technical debt that we build up is very real. And this conversation kind of started in software development world, migrated into DevOps, and now into operations. But the concepts are all the same. We rush to get something done because it's a priority, and it never gets fully fleshed out. It never gets done 100% properly. And now we have this languishing piece of work that we kind of have to keep rolling forward. What are the risks to doing these upgrades? Well, first of all, you've got to make sure that before you do anything, you have either proper backups or recovery methodology that will allow you to get back to your current state if you fail in the upgrade process, right? So number one, right off the bat, risk. You may not have the right subscriptions, or you may not have the right licensing, anything like that, that currently you might be okay with, or you might be out of compliance with because you're out of support. You need to kind of right size your environment and make sure that all of those things are there before you start this upgrade process. And then you have the kind of the services that are being supported on that server, right? So you have maybe middleware on there, maybe you have applications running on there, you have scripting that was done by that guy that was here a couple of years ago but is no longer, and his stuff just kind of works, and we don't really know where it lives or how it's maintained or anything like that. There's a lot to look at without just considering the operating system, right? Fundamentally, we start at the OS, but we have to consider every single runtime on that server before we can feel comfortable about moving everything forward. And if you fail, if you miss something, then you have potentially a 90%, 95% working system, but there are weird things that occur. And diagnosing what those are and why they're occurring can be extremely time consuming. I mentioned the resource costs. Taking time out of your day to do this work detracts from other work that the organization is trying to accomplish. You might not get a nice project put together for you. It might just be something that's thrown over the wall at you. So there's no real project tracking or end dates or goals or anything like that set up. So you're kind of trying to hit a moving target, and people are just kind of looking at your watch going, why aren't you done with that yet? So that's that's kind of a cultural challenge that kind of exacerbates this very complex issue. And then just the standard practices. Sure, once you do this maybe 3, 4, 5 times, you will kind of have a sense of how this is all going to work, but you got to get there. You got to go fight those battles, and you've got to get through that and kind of build your own set of best practices. Now, if you bring in someone like Crossvale to kind of help we mitigate a lot of those potential issues. And primarily the way we do that is through experience and through the ability to already have kind of those best practices in our back pocket. And we know, for instance, what modules are needed, what packages need to be upgraded for a specific product. We can look at your entire application stack and look at what's going on in those servers and do a deep dive, kind of unravel the ball of yarn, if you will, and give you a migration plan and make sure that all of the things are connected, everything's lined up properly, and then actually perform that work for you. Again, freeing you up to not only do your day job, but also giving you a real project, right? So something that can be reported to management. Here's the timelines, here's the expected dates. These are actively tracked. We're going to do this in the correct order. We're going to follow the best methodology for the particular server in question. Those are all things that you're going to get out of bringing in kind of a dedicated group to do this work for you. So let's talk about a specific example. We have a client that we are migrating around 300 servers from a CentOS 6 environment. They are facing a PCI challenge. So they have compliance and governance that is ruling their environment, and they need to quickly right-size all of their systems in order to meet a very strict deadline, right? So in the question of, well, why would we need to do this? This is a great example. There is a literal business factor driving this migration. It's not just, oh, we need to right size or we're out of support or anything like that. This is, our business stops running if we don't get this done. So the approach that we have taken was really kind of a great example of how we can lead and help understand what's going on in your own environment. So as we started this, it was a pure migration conversation. We looked at all of the systems that they had. They had a number of different application servers. They had a bunch of utility servers, file servers, that sort of thing. Pretty standard environment. Well, we quickly understood that they were already trying to move some of their applications into containerized services. And so we were able to bring in OpenShift as an alternative to keeping a fairly sizable footprint of servers running. And so we actually reduced the calendar scope by introducing OpenShift and moving their applications onto that platform and shrinking their entire server portfolio by about 80 servers. So that was kind of a nice win right off the bat. And then from there, we had to take the remaining servers and still do the migration. And then as I've talked about, those are kind of, you know, there's one-off systems out there. They had Jenkins, they had a GitLab, they have file servers, they had IDM, and all of those needed to not only have the operating system upgraded and registered with Red Hat, but they also needed to have all those servers, all those services migrated. And that's exactly what we did. Now, in our use case, we rebuilt their entire environment. So these were all net new servers, brand new operating systems installed, and then the latest versions of whatever software they were running, and then a migration of the data of their state over into the new systems. And this gets accomplished in a number of different ways. However, the key point to this is we did this in about 4.5 months. And we would not have been able to do this without two very specific tools. We used Red Hat Satellite to do the server provisioning and the continual maintenance and operational kind of longevity of the environment. And we used Tower to deploy software, to migrate data, to manage config drift, and all of those things. So again, this was an opportunity to introduce real-time operational management and tower automation for the client. And here's just a little bit more about that. Again, these tools will allow you not only to kind of speed things up in this migration process, but it also gives you a lot more flexibility in your environment, the ability to control what's going on behind the scenes, keep things right-sized, deploy things faster, deploy things in a more consistent fashion, and have all of everything kind of nicely, neatly bundled, that DevOps, GitOps model. That's really all of these tools that I talked about at the beginning that RHEL is introducing into the environment, that Red Hat's introducing into their products. They're all meant to interact with each other to give you a more operational, streamlined experience. And so that ultimately is the key message here. We need to evolve. We can't keep running our servers the way we have been in ones and twos. We have to be able to have faith in the technology and be able to have recreate strategies, rebuild with automation and management. With that, Ken, I'm going to hand it back over to you. Ken, did we lose you? Looks like he may be having internet problems. He's very choppy over there. There you go. There you go.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry about that. My mouse is moving around the screen, but nothing wasn't clicking on things. So sorry about that, everyone. You didn't need to see me flailing about there. So Brett, thanks very much. Really appreciate that. Great insight and great session. As always. So I mean, for me, yeah, one of the key takeaways there was whatever version you're on, diagnose and get it to a state where it's a known quantity. I think that's definitely a key takeaway there, and also for everyone to ask themselves, yes, I can do it, but do I have the time, and do I want to do this? So good consideration to talk about doing it yourself or bringing in some expertise. So as I said, Brett's walked us through the latest RHEL version, reasons to migrate, and the options that are available. And he finished up there with an introduction of how some of the other offerings in the Red Hat stack can complement that migration effort. And the great thing about those tools is that they then can continue to add value to your business and your enterprise as you move forward. It's not just use them once and have to discard them. And just to finish off here before we look at some questions, I mentioned earlier, I think Brett mentioned it as well. So after the fact, after you deploy this, or to run your migration, fantastic. What do we do next? Well, obviously you can continue to manage that yourself and hopefully have a methodology to ensure that there isn't a configuration or version slipping in the past, or you can look at and consider the managed services offering that Crossvale has right throughout the Red Hat stack and into the application layer, which we can build on top of your choice of on-premises or cloud deployment, public or private. And finally, Brett talked about the satellite smart management and Ansible. This slide just gives you an example of how we can work with you to decide what's the best deployment for those. So we have various deployment models and delivery models depending on what your needs are and where you need to be at the end of that journey. Because you are on a journey, you need to figure out where you are, where you need to go, and we're here to help you today on that. So with that, let's have a look and see if we have any questions. Here we go. So just one in there. So Brett, we talked a lot about the operating system layer and an application. So what's the biggest consideration there if you are an application owner in terms of caring about the operating system layer?
It's a good question. So I guess it depends on how far away you are removed from the OS. Now, obviously, an application doesn't run in a vacuum. It does have lots of dependencies on either middleware or excuse me, or the operating system itself. So regardless of what your application is doing, there's going to be some level of impact to you with this this migration. If you have to upgrade the operating system, you are at a minimum most likely going to suffer a little bit of downtime as the system reboots at kind of a core level. But more importantly, again, as I mentioned through the talk, if you are reliant on services or scripts or certain libraries on that system, obviously that needs to be tracked, that needs to be understood, that needs to be managed to keep the health of the application running as expected. And that is not necessarily always a simple task because those things aren't always laid out neatly in front of you. And so those kinds of things can generate all sorts of weird, odd little behavior in your application. Things go missing, and suddenly, this thing that maybe gets hit once or twice never starts not working, and you have a 5% failure rate, and you've got to go troubleshoot it. So there's actually a lot of things that happen underneath the hood that could affect your application. So I would say you are very interested in this particular scenario, and you should be very heavily vested in the process and paying attention.
Wonderful, excellent. So we're going to leave it there. I want to again thank Brett particularly, but also thanks to everyone who turned up with a fantastic crowd here today. As we mentioned, the webinar will be available on demand in about 24 hours. You'll receive some information where to get that. And please don't ever hesitate to reach out. We're here to help. We're here to help you on your journey, and we look forward to seeing you on our next webinar on the Rethink series. So from all across Crossvale, thank you very much to everybody.